Welcome, Seeker. Leave the frantic world behind. Here, the shadows whisper secrets, and history is only half the story. You've entered the folklore vault, where every myth is cataloged, every legend unlocked. Settle in and make sure you hit subscribe to join us for every discovery.
The Talking Skull, a tale of pride and silence. Friends, imagine a silence so deep, so absolute, that it feels less like the absence of sound and more like a heavy physical presence. That was the air in the village of Karama. The dawn mist, thick and chilling, didn't just lie over Karama, it clung to it like a cold, wet cloth pulled across the face of the earth. This wasn't ordinary fog. It was a suffocating blanket woven from generations of unspoken fear. In Karama, to be loud was to be foolish. To laugh freely was to invite disaster. But every rule has its exception, and every silence finds a voice determined to break it. In the center of the market square, a place usually reserved for hushed bartering, stood the imposing figure of Okonkwo the Hunter. He was a statue of bronze muscle and sheer, blinding arrogance. His voice, a relentless booming baritone, tore through the quiet morning, shattering that fragile peace as cleanly as a stone breaks ice. "I tell you all, there is no corner of this world I have not seen," he roared. His hand slapped his thigh with a sound like a rifle shot. "Mysteries? Superstitions. I feel nothing but contempt for these feeble village tales. There is nothing that can surprise Okonkwo the Great. The spirits themselves surely turn aside when they see me approach." A wave of dread rippled through the gathered crowd. The market women drew their cloaks tighter. Near the great baobab tree, old Mama Kande, whose eyes held the weary wisdom of countless seasons, clicked her tongue sharply. Her voice, thin yet carrying an unmistakable weight of authority, cut through his bluster. "Okonkwo," she warned, her words tasting of dry dust and warning. "Pride is a seed that will grow into a tree of sorrow, and some mysteries, great hunter, are better left alone." Okonkwo merely laughed, a massive, dismissive, arrogant sound that chased the birds from the branches. He dismissed her counsel and the timid whispers of the young men, declaring them worms who listened to tales of fear. His need for glory was not a desire, it was a blinding sun, incinerating every whisper of caution. "I will give you proof," he announced, raising his hunting spear high. "I will go into the deepest, darkest part of that forest, the place where even the birds refuse to sing, and I will return with a wonder that will make you all bow before me and admit your cowardice." Mama Kande's final, silent prayer was lost on the wind. Okonkwo had already turned his back on them, his fate sealed not by a curse, but by the reckless hubris of his own heart. He plunged into the forest before the first light had truly broken. The familiar hunting paths soon betrayed him. As the sun climbed, the vibrant symphony of the forest died, replaced by an oppressive, liquid silence. The air became heavy, thick, carrying a strange, unsettling scent, part decay, part ancient, forgotten ceremony. He forced himself forward, dismissing a prickle of unease as merely bad air and old trees. Then he stumbled. He emerged not into a natural space, but a deliberate one, a perfectly circular clearing, carved from the heart of the forest. The earth was bare, packed hard and smooth, and scattered across it, like a careless farmer's harvest, were human bones. Skulls lay half-buried, their sightless orbits staring up at the fragmented canopy. A chilling dread finally coiled in his stomach. but he crushed it down with a desperate rationalization. Old battle, criminals, nothing mysterious about death. But then he saw it. At the center, resting on a flat, dark stone, like a macabre offering, was the skull. It was pristine, unmarked, the color of smooth, aged ivory, and seemed to absorb the dim light, almost glowing. Most unsettlingly, its jaw was perfectly intact, the teeth a sharp white crescent, suggesting not death, but a terrifying finality. Okonkwo approached with a strange, hypnotic fascination. This was the wonder. He reached out, his fingers trembling, not from fear, but from the electric anticipation of his triumph. And the skull spoke. Talking brought me here. Okonkwo's hand froze mid-air, every muscle seizing. His hunter's heart, which had thundered through 1,000 dangers, now hammered against his ribs with panicked force. He spun around, searching wildly for a trick, a hidden mocker. The clearing was empty. Only the bones, the suffocating silence, and the skull resting on its cold altar. I am hearing things, he thought, his own mind a desperate, betraying echo. He took a shaky breath, forcing a nervous laugh, and reached for the skull again. Talking brought me here, the voice repeated, a dry rasp like rustling leaves, cold as a sudden, impossible draft. The primal instinct screamed at him to flee, but his pride, his most dangerous weapon, took hold. This was not a curse. This was the greatest prize. The vision of the villagers' humbled, terrified faces was enough to silence all fear. He wrestled his panic into submission and then addressed the bone. Skull, how did you come to be here? I command you to speak, he demanded louder now. Silence. Absolute deep cold silence. Thick cloth, but clear in its ominous weight. Talking brought me here. Talking will bring you here too. Okonkwo did not stop. He ran, plunging back into the silent green, clutching the greatest prize any hunter had ever claimed, deafened by the roar of his impending triumph. Okonkwo burst back into the village square hours later, gasping for breath, but his face radiating manic triumph. The sun was dipping below the horizon, bathing Karama in a fiery, urgent light. People of Karama, he bellowed, gather. Gather and witness what Okonkwo the Great has brought back from the deepest forest. They emerged cautiously, Oba Adewale the chief approaching with slow, judicious steps. You doubted me, Okonkwo declared, savoring the moment. You whispered of mysteries. But I, Okonkwo, have proven that your fears are hollow tales for children. With a dramatic, agonizing slowness, he pulled the skull from his bag, holding the gleaming ivory high above his head. A skull, a young man murmured. Why is this one special? It is special, Okonkwo screamed, because it talks. I heard it with my own ears. It said, talking brought me here, and it will speak again. Watch, watch, and be amazed. He held the skull out, pleading, commanding, absolute silence. He shook the skull, a desperate, pathetic gesture. It remained mute. The chief gently suggested that the deep forest played cruel tricks on the mind. Okonkwo screamed his refusal to accept any hint of failure. Mama Kande hobbled closer, her aged eyes boring into him. She warned him that the skull was an ancient curse and pleaded with him to return it. Forgiveness for what? Okonkwo's laugh was harsh, maniacal. For proving your superstitions are baseless stories. One by one, the villagers melted away, embarrassed and afraid, believing their hero had been touched by madness. Okonkwo stood alone, his long-sought triumph turned to ash. Consumed by a feverish need for vindication, he proposed one final desperate test. He would return, but this time he would take an unimpeachable witness. The chief reluctantly agreed, sending Olumide, a young man known throughout Karama for his honesty, but more importantly, for his rare, unflappable, quiet nature. Olumide never boasted, never rushed. He was the perfect neutral observer. As they set off, Mamakande materialized before Olumide, gripping his arm with surprising strength. "When you are in that clearing," she hissed, her voice a dry whisper that felt colder than the mist. "Whatever you hear, whatever you see, do not speak unless you must. Lock your words behind your teeth. Swear to me." Olumide, shaken by her urgency, nodded a solemn oath. They reached the clearing. Okonkwo placed the skull back on the stone. He pleaded. He demanded. He began to rant, his defense a torrent of frustrated, boasting words. "I am the greatest hunter. I am the most courageous man. I would not lie." He knelt before the skull, his voice barely audible. "Skull, I beg you, speak. Prove that I am not a fool." The silence that followed stretched until Olumide thought his own heart would burst. Then the voice came, soft, dry, cold. "Talking brought me here." Olumide staggered back, his blood running cold. He had heard it, clear as a bell. His mind screamed for release, for him to declare the miracle, to shout the truth to Okonkwo. But the memory of Mamakandi's frantic warning, "Do not speak," locked his throat. He had just witnessed the impossible, yet he felt a terrifying compulsion to confess the chief's true mandate. Okonkwo snatched the skull, eyes shining with a crazed, triumphant fire. "You heard it. Tell me you heard it." Olumide could only nod, his lips pressed together, his body rigid with fear and the impossible burden of silence. As they left, Olumide cast one last glance back and saw a subtle, horrifying movement in the clearing, a tremor among the scattered bones, a brief, silent stirring. It was as if the gallery of the dead was taking a deep, satisfied breath. The chief, accepting Olumide's fearful, silent testimony, delivered the final ultimatum: return the skull or be banished. Okonkwo, utterly consumed by his wounded vanity, chose banishment. He slipped out that night, heading not for the Forbidden Forest, but for the wealthy trade village of Ogidi. He would sell the skull, become rich, and prove them all fools. He was running from his people, but he was running with the curse. He stopped to rest by a stream and unwrapped the skull, continuing his obsessive, one-sided conversation. "We are smarter," he confided to the bone. "We will be rich, and they will be poor and afraid." He heard a faint rustling. He spun around, finding nothing. He turned back, and there, sitting on a log, was Mamakandi. "I am not here, Okonkwo," she said, her voice a dry echo, yet carrying immense weight. "But the knowledge I carry is, you are on the path of my brother Adamu." He was bound to that place because he could not resist boasting of a sacred secret. That skull is the sealed, living prison of a man who loved the sound of his own voice more than his own people. The shock was profound. The cursed skull had a name and a lineage, but Okonkwo's pride, his refusal to be defeated by a dead man's ghost, held firm. He stepped back. "I will not be defeated by a dead man's ghost. I will prove you wrong." Mamakande's lips pressed into a thin line of final sorrow. "Then may the ancestors have mercy, for you have chosen your path." She shimmered, a brief ripple, and was gone. Okonkwo stepped back from the place where Mamakande had stood. His heart pounded not with the adrenaline of the chase, but with the cold, damp terror of certainty. He was not running toward wealth. He was running from a profound, terrifying truth. He was running with a prison that had belonged to his enemy's brother, and he had invited it in. He wrapped the skull, but now the ivory bone felt different. It was unnaturally warm against his skin, a burning core in the cool forest air. He walked on, faster now, but the forest no longer seemed empty. Every shadow felt like a gaze, and every dry leaf rustle sounded like a whispered judgment. By the time he reached the outskirts of Ogidi, the great trade village, Okonkwo was a desperate hollow shell. The moment he boasted of the skull's powers, his cousin Ezekiel and the cautious merchants recoiled, their faces shifting from welcoming interest to suspicion and fear. They had heard the traveler's gossip. The hunter from Karama is mad. He carries a death bone. Humiliated, abandoned, and driven out, Okonkwo slumped at the edge of the forest, the skull in his lap. The finality of his failure choked him. "Why?" he choked out, tears of frustration blinding him. "Why would you not speak for them? Why do you make me a beggar and a fool?" And the skull spoke, its voice carrying an unsettling note of familiarity. It sounded exactly like Okonkwo's own voice, distorted and dry, dripping with self-pity and contempt. "Because talking brought me here. And talking will bring you here too." The ultimate clarity. Okonkwo understood everything. The skull didn't need to speak to anyone else. It only needed to speak to him. The more he spoke of it, the more he defended his pride in taking it, the tighter the noose became. His pride, his endless need to talk, was the mechanism of his destruction. He felt an invisible, irresistible cord snap around his chest, pulling him with the force of his own lifetime of arrogance. He rose, the skull in his hand, and his feet moved without command, drawn by a terrifying, accelerating force back toward Karama, back to the clearing. The horror of the run. As he ran, the full psychological attack began. The skull did not stop. It began to whisper constantly from the bag, not with the deep, dry voice of Adamu, but with the stolen, confident baritone of Okonkwo himself, mocking him, praising his lost greatness, and urging him to boast one last time. "Go on, Okonkwo. Tell yourself you can stop. Your will is strong. Say it. Say you're the strongest. You are worth more than Adamu. Tell yourself you can break free." The voice became a duel inside his head, his own sanity fighting his stolen voice. "Please, I don't want to go there," he pleaded, the words spilling out, reinforcing the curse with every single syllable. His hands clawed at the invisible cord around his chest, but he could not break the pull. He ran as fast as his feet would carry him, his journey home a dizzying spiral into madness. Okonkwo, dragged by a force outside himself, his muscles screaming but unable to stop, stumbled blindly into the clearing. His magnificent, once powerful body, a monument to his own pride, now moved like a puppet on fraying strings. He collapsed onto his knees by the stone, the skull rolling from his nerveless hand. Moments later, the chief and elders, guided by Mamakande and accompanied by a pale, terrified Olumide, found him. They watched from the perimeter, frozen by the grim certainty of the scene. Mamakande's voice was a ragged shriek. "Do not touch him. He is bound. He is too late." Okonkwo looked up at them. The frenzy was gone. His face, etched with a sudden terrible clarity, was the face of a man who saw not the forest, but the bottom of his own soul. "It was never the skull," he whispered, the final word leaving his throat a defeated sigh. "It was my tongue. All my life, my mouth was my greatest weapon and my greatest curse." He tried to stop. He truly tried. His whole body convulsed in a silent, desperate war against his own voice, his hands clamped over his mouth in a final, futile gesture. But the chain was complete. The skull had claimed its final payment. "Tell them," he urged, his voice fading rapidly, thin as dry bone dust. "Tell them that Okonkwo the Great, the boastful hunter, died because he could not be silent. Tell them that talking brought me here. With that final confession, Okonkwo's body crumpled, but the story did not end with his death. A collective gasp tore through the onlookers. As Okonkwo's flesh failed, the intact jaw of the original skull, Adamu's prison, made a sound. Not a voice, but a sharp, clean click, like the snapping of an ancient lock. And then, from the throat of Okonkwo's collapsed, lifeless body, came the dry, rasping voice of the original curse, uttering the familiar, chilling words of Adamu. It is time for the new guard. Then, the final, visceral horror. Okonkwo's skull separated cleanly from his neck, landing with a soft, final thud beside Adamu's. But the new skull, Okonkwo's skull, was the one that was pristine, smooth, and ivory white, radiating that awful superior contempt. The old one, Adamu's, now looked dull, cracked, and tired, finally stripped of its power. Mama Kande rushed forward, falling to her knees between the two skulls, her face a mask of profound sorrow and relief. "Oh, Adamu, you are free. You are finally free. But your freedom is paid with the life of another man's great pride." The terrible truth settled over the clearing. The curse was not to make a skull talk. It was to find a new, perfectly prideful host to house the curse, allowing the old, worn-out skull, Adamu, to finally find eternal rest. Okonkwo's pride had not been punished. It had been harvested. The chilling mist of Karama did not leave that day. It returned, heavier, colder, because now the village wasn't just living under Adamu's weary curse, it was living under Okonkwo's eternal, superior pride. The two skulls were left side by side on the stone. Adamu's cracked relic and Okonkwo's pristine, silent, prideful new prison. The horror was not yet complete. Olumide, the quiet witness who had saved himself with a vow of silence, was the only one who truly understood the transfer. He had to live with the knowledge that his external silence had saved his life. But his mind, his internal, boastful voice, was the true, ultimate target. Karama returned to a silence far deeper than before, a silence built not on mist, but on bone-deep terror. For weeks, Olumide could not sleep. He constantly heard a sound, not the skull's dry rasp, but the terrifying echo of his own inner monologue, arguing, judging, and planning his own glory. Why didn't they choose me as chief? I saw the truth. I am smarter than them. I will be the one to save this village. He realized the skull's power wasn't just in the forest, it was in the mind, amplifying the dangerous, prideful talk we tell ourselves. The skull was waiting, listening to the very words he thought. Driven mad by his own boastful thoughts, he went to Mama Kande one final time. She smiled, a weary, knowing look. "The curse is not on the object, child. It is on the heart that cannot be silent. The skull simply makes that heart its cage." You were quiet that day, Olumide, but tell me, when Okonkwo snatched that skull and the chief asked for your testimony, what did you think to say? Olumide stared at her, chilled to his soul. He thought, I should speak. I should prove I was right. I should be the one to save the village. He knew. The skull was waiting for him. The curse was transferable, and the internal voice was the final key. And so, Olumide did not become a great elder or a hero. He became the village's sentinel of silence, living a life of excruciating self-control. He taught himself to think only in terms of need, not self-praise. He carried the crushing, necessary burden of knowing that his own, most cherished thoughts could one day become the chilling, final words of the curse. He spends his days tending the edge of the forbidden forest. Sometimes, when the mist is thickest, he swears he hears a muffled whisper carried on the cold air, a familiar deep baritone full of contempt. I am the greatest. I am the cleverest. You will talk. You will fail. The story of Okonkwo became Karama's most enduring legend, a final, terrifying lesson that transcends simple folk magic, whispering the truth through the mist for all of us, a truth that echoes whenever we catch ourselves taking too much credit or silencing a dissenting voice. And the chilling sound that punctuates the end is always the same, a dry, cold rasp that comes from deep within our own mind. Talking brought me here. Talking will bring you here too.
If the myths and secrets we explored today captivated your curiosity, don't keep it hidden. Please like this video, comment below with your thoughts, and share this discovery with others. Most importantly, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you'll be the first to uncover what the Folklore Vault unlocks next. Until then, keep questioning the legends.